It's back. And on behalf of my wife, Emma, who's coordinating, she's at work today. She said to, first of all, let you know that next week is going to be a surprise. But today, we have two people that are very near and dear to Open Heart, very graceful and masterful and all of those wonderful things. Let's welcome Margaret and Matthew Lee. Yeah. Theme for the month is embrace the darkness, welcome the light. Embrace the darkness, welcome the light. And I'm going to tell you, when I was doing my meditation and contemplation for the theme for the month and the direction that we were going to go in, and when the words embrace the darkness came to me, my immediate reaction was, darkness was not my friend. Anybody feel me on that? Darkness was not my friend. As a matter of fact, in most certainly in growing up, darkness was not my friend. I was one of those children that was always scared of the dark. And I was scared because I lived in a house that to me was big and spooky. It had a basement that had a room way in the back where the furnace was. And in my mind, there were all kinds of monsters and creatures and everything else that were going to come out of the basement, out of that room, come up the stairs into my bedroom one night and get me. Not only that, but in the closet in my bedroom, there was a chest that looked like a castle. So for a very long time, I would sit up at night, scared. Scared, first of all, because I thought something was going to come up out of the basement, up the stairs into my bedroom and get me, or something was going to open that chest and come on out and get me. That was the first thing I was scared of. The second thing was I had cried out to my mother and father enough times that they told me, if you tell us one more time, we're going to give you something to be scared of. So I had to stay in my bed, and I developed a routine. There was a woman in the church, her name was Maggie Russell, that we attended, that every year, for whatever reason, would give my sister and I these little AM radios. And so I would be there in the bed, this transistor radio, and have a little, earpiece, and I would have that earpiece in, and the station I like to listen to actually was on an FM station. So I found that, easy listening music didn't do it, classical music didn't do it, it was country music. So every night, I would lay in bed, scared, listening to country music. And then where we lived, our house was on the bus line. And in Dayton, Ohio, where I grew up, we had electric buses. They were trolley buses, and they would go along, and they would start at 4 in the morning. And there was something about when they passed over those joints or whatever, there was a little sound that they would make. And for whatever reason, that brought me comfort. So when I would go to bed, I'm there most of the night, listening to country music, scared that something was going to come up out of the basement, up the stairs in my room and get me, or open the chest and come out and get me, until 4 a.m. when the buses started. There's something about that would comfort me and that would allow me to go to sleep. And I'd sleep from 4 to probably about 7, and then, I have to get up and go to school. So darkness was not my friend. And so when I heard the words come to me that said, embrace the darkness, I said, how can I talk about embracing the darkness? Because all I wanted was for the darkness to be over with. Yeah. I wanted it to be over with. I didn't want to embrace it. I wanted it to be done. And I started thinking about the fact that there is not only a sense of physical darkness, there's also mental darkness. Huge. And mental darkness is when we find ourselves in that spot, in that place where things are just really kind of getting at us and things are happening, and we are in mental darkness. And I really feel like that in this country right now, it feels like we are in mental darkness. When you look at all of the things that are happening around us and the things that are happening with the various police departments and incidents and things like that, and the racist attitudes that go on, and the intolerance and all of the things that's rearing its ugly head, it feels like that we are in a mental darkness as well. And the thing of it is, again, we want the darkness to be over. But I think there's something there about embracing the darkness. And it's no accident, I think, that at this time of year, that one of the things that people have sought to do throughout history is embrace the darkness. If you think about, for example, you think about we're moving into the Winter Solstice and all that it means. We have in this month where also we celebrate Hanukkah, the festival of lights, but there is also the understanding that there cannot be light without darkness. And then we spiritual wisdom has said already something about embracing the darkness. So as I began to explore that again and think about that again in my mind, I recognize and realize that when we embrace the darkness, we can see that in darkness there are opportunities and gifts that are available to us if we only will stop and take the time to embrace. So we have to learn how to embrace darkness and discover what those gifts are. And as I went back and reflected again on that time growing up as a child, sitting there afraid that something was going to come up out of the basement and come and get me and all of those things, something that I celebrated all of a sudden is that in spite of all of that agony and all of that anguish and all of that anxiety and all that I went through, I'm still here. It means I'm a survivor. It means that I have the ability to stand in circumstances and situations that may seem dark, that may seem difficult, but the gift that I receive from that is to be able, first of all, to survive, to be able to move through that. And then as I started thinking about that, and you know, I made it humorous and those kinds of things, but my imagination was something that worked overtime, but it also helped me to understand the gift of imagination, as Neville tells us all the time, that our imagination is God, and our imagination, by using that, we're able to create our reality and create our lives, that we can set things in the way that we want to be. So again, there are gifts that are there when it comes to embracing the darkness. We want the darkness to be over with, but if you think about it for a moment, it can be scary. Darkness can be scary, it can be lonely, it can be frightening, it can be so many things, but if you think about it for a moment, if you are in a room that suddenly turns dark, or you walk into a dark room, and first of all, you feel disoriented, you feel frightened, you feel like something's going on. But if you take a moment and you stop, you begin to realize that you can see better than you thought you could. You can understand then your environment and your circumstances better than you thought you could if you only don't fight the darkness. Our teaching reminds us that that which we resist persists. So when we fight against those things that are unwanted, we only add to it and we only give it power. And the thing that's really important as we find ourselves going through periods of darkness is to understand this, that it's not what happens to us that makes a difference, it's what we think about what happens to us. How we process it, how we view it, how our opinion. Irvin Seal in his book, Take Off From Within, talks about that a great deal, about how we have to understand and we have to learn that it's about what we think about what happens to us rather than what happens to us. And so, as I thought about embracing the darkness and welcoming the light, I also moved to the understanding that in the midst of all of this, when we talk about all of this, there's some good news. And that good news is this. The good news is that in the world of spirit, and Charles kind of set the tone for that, but in the world of spirit, it makes no difference whether it's dark or light. Darkness and light are the same in the world of spirit. And as I contemplated on that, and as that kind of rolled through my mind and through my spirit and all of that, I began to also think about one of my, in fact, not one of my favorite songs, but my favorite song that I think speaks to that. And it brings to me a sense of comfort, a sense of understanding, a sense of knowing that in all of this, that in the world of spirit, there is no difference between darkness and light. No separation, no difference. Psalm 139, my favorite. And there's a portion that says, where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb, another place of darkness. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. The fact that in spirit and with spirit, there is no difference between darkness and light. It's all the same. And when we learn to embrace darkness and welcome the light, we connect with that within us that, again, when we look at the darkness of being a place that not only can frighten us, but from that place, creation and birth and beginning all emanate from the darkness. And when we can get into that understanding, it helps us to know that there are opportunities and chances for us all as we connect with Spirit. Susan Taylor, in her book, In the Spirit, tells the story of a woman who had probably one of the biggest nightmares that a parent could ever happen to her. She had been a woman that had been married and had several children. She got divorced and she was raising her children on her own. She had one that had already died from an illness, and she had her other 3 children that they were making, and she had started an after-school program and was doing some really fantastic things with that. But they lived in a house that wasn't quite yet together the way they wanted it to be. And so they had some work that was being done on the electrical system in the house. And she told her teenage son, whatever you do, there's certain things, don't plug them up and don't use them. And one night she went to bed and left her son, who was 18, up to do whatever it is he was going to do. And she had her other 2 daughters, that one was, I believe, 7 and the other 10, and went to bed. And in the middle of the night, she heard, cries and screams, and she was startled, but she got up and realized that the house was on fire. And so she got up out of bed, and when she thought that the fire was contained right in one place, but the phone wouldn't work. So she figured, I'll just run right next door and call the fire department so they can come and put the fire out, and we'll be safe. But much to her dismay, that as she walked out of the house, she realized that it was in much greater fire, had consumed much more than she thought it had. And so she made her way to her neighbor's house and screamed and asked them to call the fire department, and she tried to get back in the house. Every entrance was blocked off. And she unfortunately had to experience the fact that she lost all 3 children in the fire. And her ex-husband tried to accuse her of being neglectful and deliberately doing that, and then the news media lambasted her and all of that. She found herself in a place again where she just couldn't go on with her life. She even attempted suicide once and was living in a very dark place in her mind and all of that. And suddenly, the idea that you're still here and there's a purpose for you being here. And she began to explore that purpose and began to connect with the spirit that was within her, and began to find that that place where she thought was darkness, there started to become the appearance of light. There started to become the idea that, yes, I am. And I started something, and while I maybe don't have the children biologically that I had, there's still something I can do on behalf of children. And she ultimately went on to expand the program that she had, so that not only has she been mother to those 4 children who all unfortunately had made their transition, but over the years, one day she counted, and she had been like a mother to 8,000 children, because the things that she did had touched them and had made a difference in their lives. And so my point this morning is that when we find ourselves in situations of darkness. When we find ourselves in, I talked about how this nation is, the way things are happening now. I happen to be naive enough to believe that what's going to turn things around are going to be those of us who are true students. Those of us who don't get caught up all the time in the rhetoric and everything else, but know that there is something different. Those of us who understand that darkness might be here now, but light is coming. And when we understand that light is coming, it helps to encourage us. I mean, I read the comments and I hear people talking about things and I see the stuff and everything like that, but it's a part of me that understands that light is coming. And my favorite quote talks about the fact of the bird who, even while it's still dark, begins singing, and it says that's what hope is. And for me, in this season, I'm reminded of hope. That even on those days, as the days get shorter and shorter and the night gets bigger and bigger, I'm like that bird that keeps on singing, even while it's dark, that the light is coming. There's hope. Embrace the darkness. Welcome the light.